recording. Yeah, so we'll be picking up starting from the Boolean file. So these ones, just a refresher on the welds and stuff like that. We were basically pre-fracturing this sphere. We look up here, just copying grids, doing the Boolean shatter. This is just visualizing the fracture pattern. So each island or each cut shard gets its own unique color, just as a visualize to see the pattern. And then just with this preset Vellum constraints node, drop down or whatever to weld points, then you can set a threshold for how easy it is to break. There's also other things we can try in terms of methods to dissolve these. Like you could just delete or turn the constraint into a broken property to kind of manually dissolve it. But yeah, this just started with this file just because it's a good refresher on kind of where we were leaving off or whatever. P-scale 2. I'm not sure how much P-scale affects it. I believe for Vellum, the only thing that P-scale controls is the collisions, like the thickness of it. So all the constraints and their attributes are usually on the primitives, like they're in this magenta, pink, I don't know, whatever color it is, chain. So it's all primitive attributes. So the primitives share 2 points, like the start and end anchors or areas of the constraints. So I don't believe that P-scale has any effect on it. I believe, like if you do, I think that there was a way, maybe it's just on the default cloth setup, visualize thickness. So this is based off of the P-scale, and I believe that's the only place that the P-scale is used. In SF, had some apocalyptic days, very sad. Yes, so that was on Wednesday. It was super disorienting. Basically, the sun never came up that day. Like going out at just waking up, like it was just even at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. it still felt like it could have been like 3 a.m. or something like that. And then even at like 3 p.m. In the afternoon, people still had their exterior lights on, like the city lights. It was just a day of it was pretty scary. You just don't see the sun at all or whatever. Chris Arn, how's it going? Yes, I believe that's it. Like if you want to more closely inspect some of these, you could look at the spreadsheet. And then if you look at the type, I believe these, I don't know that they're clearly marked. One thing you can do that can be helpful is under somewhere in here, I believe it's a bit confusing. Output group. So if I make this welds, and then I go back to this node and right click on it, group welds, anywhere that value is 1, then I can be certain that these constraints are created from the weld node or the weld process. And if you're modifying these constraints in the solver or later on, it can be useful because like you can see here the type bend. This is like internally how the solver is interpreting what to do with these constraints. And then this is more of like the human readable label or whatever, like just how you remember yourself which node created these constraints or what they're going to be used for. So I think on, it might be stiffness. Let me just pin this. You could always just change this. That might actually get set on the points or on the vertices. I'm not sure where this one is I guess it's getting scaled by the attribute. It might actually modify stuff on the yeah, I believe it's getting set here on the points. So the break threshold. All right. So I might just start with another sphere, just like a default. It's a good test object or whatever. Kira, how's it going? Hi. You could keep going with the Boolean fracture methods, or I think as well for some of the peeling effects. Voronoi can be pretty useful for that. Like if you look at just paint peeling or like cracking, some references of these textures and stuff. Some of this gets pretty close to Voronoi patterns, like the cells or cellular stuff like that. Trying to work while watching. Hope I'm well. Have some good oxygen to breathe out here. Yeah, it's the air quality I think is still not fully breathable, but it's getting better. The visibility and sunlight and stuff like that is a lot better, which is nice. So yeah, if you examine some of this stuff closely, you could kind of see those Voronoi patterns a little bit. So we'll just get started with that and see what happens. So just scatter points. Usually I turn the relax off. Just you get like a pure randomness without any these just keep adding like smoothing passes to try to push things apart. Then you just do the touch rehedralize. Bit of a tongue twister. Connected polylines. And then you can do the Voronoi split. Whoops. So we don't need the interior surface. Because we want this to be treated like a shell or like a cloth. You could do this stamp pieces with point numbers. It's usually just handy to have that information around. Then we could look at that same process we were doing before to visualize, basically just connectivity and color. Just grab those nodes, paste it, and then we can see what each island looks like. You did a quick peel effect in Houdini. Did you do it the same way with welds and Vellum and all that stuff? I know there's a super old way people were doing it. I don't think it's available anymore, but there was a spring sop that people used sometimes. There was a super old CMI VFX peeling tutorial. I don't know if I can even find the screenshot. Here it is. They had this matchbox that was like peeling off, turning into ashes or whatever. They'd appreciated the spring sop. Yeah, I think they did. If you just do up, hide, you can see all the ones that they depreciated. But yeah, if you look stop spring, there it is. I think if I wanted to, if you want to look at it again, you can do up, unhide, and then you type in the one that you want, and then you have it back. But this was, yeah, it's kind of a super hacky node that people don't use too much. Is kind of like a solver, like the really old particle solver was doing it like this, where it's a bit of a black box and it does the simulation and stuff like that all in SOPs, I think. Might need to add like, you just do all the forces up here or whatever. It's kind of weird. But yeah, you can get paint peeling stuff with it super quick, but I think they hit it just because it's like not the blessed Houdini workflow anymore. Like you can't really add other forces or customize it that well. The Vellum stuff is really nice because everything sits in the same world. Like all of the micro solvers or those pop forces and stuff, you can use them with it. So you have some similar controls in terms of like turbulence or wind, but you're able to do it using these ones. And then you can apply it based off of point groups, or you can use vec expressions to have like the wind getting masked by a point attribute or something like that. So that's, I think that was their main thinking behind doing this, is just like get these old workflows out of practice or whatever. I believe it is 1080p. We should be good, crystal clear quality. Let's check this out. Oh, nice. I like this kind of wrapping paper shader. That perfect loop. So this was with Vellum, Chris Arn? Do you know the Peter Quint peeling tutorial, Julian? Do you know how he set it up? Was it with Vellum? I think you could do it. You could do some cloth stuff with the older cloth solvers before they implemented Vellum, but it was just a bit slower. It wasn't as good. Yeah, I really like the timing on that loop. Feels really luxurious, explosive. You can pitch it to Louis Vuitton or Gucci. I have them with the pattern, their luxury prints, wrapping papers and stuff like that happening on it. What do we have here? This is some peeling. Yeah, I think they had it popping out at the end. This stuff was pretty cool. It's like a animal kind of breaking out of its skin. Yeah, you could do it pre-Vellum. I did it sometimes using the grains. Like, I think it was Houdini 16, and I did some tearing because before Vellum, people were doing some like cloth effects just with the grain constraints. It was quicker than cloth and all that stuff, but just you didn't get as good of bending and stretching and those kinds of material aspects of it. Yeah, this frame right here is really nice. Just doing the shading and fabrics and stuff is really makes it look cool. The Nike animation. The man versus machine. I feel like Nike should give like $1 million to side effects just to improve Vellum, so they can do more sneaker commercials for them. All right. Noah XYZ, how's it going? So I think we can just kind of get plugging here. We just do Vellum configure cloth, just set up the cloth properties, and let me see here. See how dense the mesh is. Might be too many pieces to just start testing with. I'm gonna do less. bits of fabric or whatever. And that might be a little too many. We'll just do like 20 chunks. So I'm doing some peeling with Vellum. I don't know if I still have that link open. Just different. These are some older methods and people that we're using with Houdini. Just installed the Houdini theme, the slate theme. Yeah, I saw someone on YouTube was asking about that as well. Textures. It was the RS noises. But yeah, I think these, just having the flat shaded windows and stuff makes it feel a little bit more modern. All right. So if we just go with these, we could actually put in this pop wind and then adding the turbulence or the amplitude here. We should get something pretty close to that spring sop, the old granddaddy spring. Yeah, the materials with Redshift, it makes it a lot of fun to play with the cloth stuff. And I think under forces, just turn off gravity. So it's already kind of like that spring sop. If we go back to this, then it's looking even closer to how that spring sop looked. I think with the spring, their turbulence was a pretty low. The swirl size of it was big, or was a low frequency noise. Yeah, because it just seemed like it was getting pulled in like only one or two directions. So this is kind of like if you wanted to replicate the spring sop with Vellum. It's just Side Effects doesn't want you using those old nodes from the 90s anymore. All right. So we don't have any bonds or welds or anything like that right now. We could add them with just a figure. So I think you could do, these are just like blank, I'm thinking of them as just like blank templates. And then I just will set it here with whatever constraint type I want to create. There's just like a lot of different ways to do the same thing with them. You might, yeah, so if you just do the Vellum weld under the tab menu, you should see the same settings pretty much. It does look like this. This one got initialized to configuring cloth, so I might just start with this one. And then by default, the braking isn't enabled. So these will always, might need to look into how these are being formed. Looks like they're not all forming. I am a fan of the quick Vellum solver for generally like most situations, just because it is so quick to get started with it. Depending on what you're trying to do, you might need to build out the full old school or the complete setup in DOPS. But by default, like, you can examine how this one's put together. It's a good starting point, and if I do need the other features, or if I'm doing like a serious development for a big effect that like a lot of people would use, or it really needs to be optimized or something like that, I might do the DOP network. But just because this is so quick to set up, I'm a fan of it. The series or the suite of tools they've been making, the Pyro. Yeah, I think so. They have a Pyro solver. They have the RBD. Is it just solver? Where is it? RBD bullet solver. Yeah, so it's nice the way that you manage the constraints and like kind of keeping it more in one stream. So just having these more simplified setups are somewhat nice because it just keeps people using like in the same naming conventions and workflows and stuff like that. Historically, just the older shelf tools, like it would make a mess at the object level, is just makes scene files like pretty hard to examine because you have to jump around into like several different geometry networks and things like that. So it's nice to have these simplified starting points are pre-built, pre-rolled. So I don't know why this stuff here isn't properly welding yet. I believe it is set up to support sparse. I haven't been using it too much because I usually go pretty wild with the pyro. Is the one territory where I do like to layer like the turbulences and stuff like that. You have access to this one aspect of it, but I usually prefer to, like even sources, I prefer to apply them in a different order that they're applying things. So pyro is the one area that I will go like fully custom or whatever with it. But I think under solving, you can do sparse, and so OpenCL doesn't work with sparse, but you could do like GPU sims and stuff with this simplified solver. And then there's the Axiom GPU solver as well that I might do a stream on a bit later on down the road at some point. Umer, the automatic MP4. Yeah, I think on that old Einstein video, I'm just trying to pull it up. I don't know if I can find it. I think I got it. Yeah, someone was asking about that. So you just grab this link here, and there's a script for it. It takes a bit of time to go into like setting it up and all that stuff, but basically on my shelf tool up here, you just go to edit tool. It's just calling the FLBK function. It's just calling that main function from that Python file or whatever. So as long as you have the Python script in your Houdini directory, like this is a super old version 15.5 or whatever, but if you put it in your Houdini 18 directory, it should work. Yeah, so we need to investigate why these welds aren't sticking together right now. I'm just gonna go back. Sorry, I'm jumping around a bit. Just see what was going on. It doesn't look like anything here really changed. So by default, if this braking is off, they shouldn't split apart. I don't know if I could do just increase like stiffness. Looks like some of these points didn't get the welds. So you just visualize the last tab. You click on the welds and that will kind of visualize the constraints. I don't know if it's this method here of cutting with the Voronoi. Maybe you need to switch it to I don't know if you need to switch it to a Boolean fracture. I'm trying just a higher frequency, like more resolution. I think I went too high. All right, let's try. This should be creating points at like all the edges where it's cutting. Looks like this is missing certain certain edge points like that. Could be an issue. Sometimes just running the clean node on the topology. Looks like that isn't really helping too much. All right, I'm gonna get rid of that. I'm just gonna play the simulation again. But yeah, it seems like this welding isn't getting all of my fracture. Could just try this standard Voronoi fracture, like that. This one as well, we just need to turn off create interior surface. I usually just prefer to do it myself. So this is like a stripped down version of it. Could do a box and then use that as the cutting planes for the Boolean. Yeah, you can set it up like that as well. I would just think it seems a bit weird because you would think like the Boolean in general seems to produce more problematic geometry in terms of like edge issues and stuff like that. But yeah, it looks like these ones here even could try doing like a bit of, I don't know, just like a very small exploded view. Like a kind of like a point jitter or something like that. I don't know, that doesn't even seem to... Seems to be making things worse. Yeah, I don't know if it is just because these are just slightly too far apart or something. Yeah, I was hoping that would work, but could switch over to doing the Boolean setup. You think just starting with a box, you just pump it in. This is like a bounding box. Splitting that, and then you think just doing like pulling all these to the origin somewhat. Boom. I don't know if this, I don't think I can do it along its normal. I think I'm gonna have to do it like doing a scale so that they aren't overlapping. And then the pivot, let's do this to the center, the centroid. Like that. And then maybe just go down to 0.01 or 0.1. I don't know. I'm just worried it going all the way to the middle. You have to delete, then run a clean and diffuse. So do no front points, like that. Clean. Oh, no extrude. Oh, so the box should be smaller than just delete the outer group. So the box should be somewhat smaller than the sphere, or should I be intersecting with it? Deepak, Rajan, how's it going? You think it can be larger? So this is clean. Use in Boolean. Surface. Surface. Shatter. Delete the outer parts. I'm not sure what you mean by the outer parts. Oh, okay, so create interior surface. Just the inside faces. So I think with this blast, you do clip point -1. Then yeah, it looks like that. Should be good. You don't think this? Whatever. You don't need to do that. Let's just see if it works. Yeah, it seems like it's getting more. I don't know if these. You think it's the sphere is just a problematic? You remember talking about using Houdini for building self-driving car? I found this presentation on Houdini's YouTube. It's working on a self-driving car. Yeah, I don't know which part of it exactly. Ah, he's working at Lyft, right? I think I saw parts of this presentation. He's not sharing any of the super secret information. But yeah, I think if you do a lot of poking around, I'm not sure how much he shares in that specific part of the video. But yeah, he's a pretty cool, I was watching other parts of that talk, like when he was introducing himself with the, showing his reel and stuff. He had some really cool pieces. So let's just play this and see what happens. Yeah, I don't know. It seems a bit odd to just try like less pieces. Let me go back over here and look at this one. just circumvent the other methods. It's like the attribute scaling and stuff like that. Yeah, it seems like this one's getting all of the cross connections. I don't know if it just prefers to use grids. We can just try that, I guess. So I had some methods here. I was using this point generator and then just copy the points with a grid to generate random cutting planes. Like that. So yeah, it looks like that one's still getting most of the connections. I might just try more. Eventually, when you create enough of these grids, you should start to get more cells, more of like a cellular pattern. Just trying to get this. Should be like a pretty uniform distribution. Let's put the color into it. You could do the point jitter as well to get the points so that they aren't all at the origin. Just need to do it before the normal gets assigned. This tries to update the normals. So you might get a bit more randomness this way. Would be too many there. So they aren't all basically occupying the same center position. All right. Let's see how well this one holds up. Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit bizarre that both the Boolean, just those cellular patterns, it's causing it to freak out. So all this stuff here seems to hold together pretty well. All right. So I think we should still be able to do this if we want some more detail on the edges. You can do rest to store the current position. And then if you do an attribute noise, just add noise to the point position. I think you want it centered. And then do the cuts when it's noised up like that. And then swap position with rest just to restore the original point position. Oof. So it looks like the new points don't get the rest attribute this way. Like the newly cut points. Can maybe just do an attribute transfer. It might just be that this noise is like too high of a frequency. You basically just get some irregular edges. I don't know. It seems a bit bad that these probably a better idea just to add some noise to the cutting planes. So instead of doing that hack, just take these grids and add the noise directly to them. I think we might want a higher frequency noise. This should give a bit better edge detail. Hopefully it doesn't break the the welding method. I don't know what. It seems odd that it doesn't support. I guess I don't know if it doesn't support it, but if it has issues with it, might have done too much. Turn off that template. Just trying to dial this noise in. All right. But that should be good. Let's take a look. So just trying to get a bit of a torn, ripped edge kind of vibe or something like that. Yeah, it looked like it still got all of them here. It's odd. And then this post process. I don't know if the stitch. This one is a better way to weld. I don't think so. Right? Let's just give it a try and see. Yeah, I don't think that that is doing what I want it to do. All right. So back to this post process with apply welds. That can help with the normals sometimes. You just want to make sure we have normals. Yeah, we still have them before it gets fractured. Sometimes adding normals to the cutting planes can help the Boolean do its thing a little bit better. Do this blur that fixes like some of the artifacts or whatever. So it just makes it harder to tell that you've been cutting it or fracturing. And then what we want to do is add the breaking ability to actually let it get ripped or torn up. We're back kind of close to to square one before we even had these breaking weld constraints built in or whatever. So yeah, this is like an in-between method now. Some areas stay intact. If you're doing peeling, probably want it to be a bit lower, just so it's not like a yeah, the inside of this Vellum solver, I have a pop wind that's just doing a turbulence or like a noise. I made it a little bit of a lower frequency, so this increase the swirl size that just makes the locality or the features of this force to happen at a lower frequency. So yeah, this, I'll just call this the test case essentially. And I'm just gonna grab everything, move it over to a new chain. I'm gonna try a new system to break these welds or the bonds. They'll turn off the force, and I'm gonna try something I haven't done before. See if I can keep breaking things. So this group by range, you can do some interesting stuff with it if you do like points. You do like 1 out of every 100 every 125 points. Kind of hard to see them, but basically, like you do 1 out of 2, you have like 50% of the points. This is a cool node to use with a grid, just like regular geometry as well. You'll start to get like, do it to primitives. You just get different patterns and whatever. If it's like kind of weaving or whatever, you skip 1 out of every 5. But yeah, so I'm just gonna do this to group portion of the geometry, maybe 1 out of 60. And then I'm gonna make another Vellum. Where did it go? Vellum. Could just start with the constraints, I guess. Put it in, and then set this one to pin the target, and then I'm gonna just use these points. I don't have them. I'm just checking the group here. I could just try typing it in. So my plan is to have them match animation, and then just whatever method you want, like jitter. If I just do time in one of these, like as the animation plays, it's just gonna yank all the points in different directions randomly, but because I'm only pinning this group 1 or the subset of them to this animation, then it should only be pulling like if you just put a bunch of like safety pins or something in a cloth and you're ripping it. Looks like it's working. I didn't break the setup worse than I thought I was going to. So yeah, this is kind of cool. Like a torture test. So it's, if you just put a bunch of like safety pins or knitting things into a scarf and started like pulling apart or something like that. So yeah, they're doing this group 1 out of every 60. Could be really cool to just do a couple of them. You middle mouse on it, you can see how many points are in the group. That's what I was checking before when I was middle mousing, just to make sure that the group still existed. So we have 12 points in that group. So now the noise inside of the Vellum solver is deactivated. And we just have the pinned points or whatever getting pulled. So I think with this one, because these are eventually going to get travel like pretty far from the base shape, could be cool to increase the breaking threshold. So you see a lot more of the tension of like the stretching or whatever before stuff starts to rip. This is pretty cool. Start to see some wild shapes. Then there was that other thing I was talking about as well with the blur. You can start to get really interesting, like organic looking stuff this way as well. It's like super fleshy skin, gross stuff. Time to make a flipbook after the blur. You think after this secondary blur? So yeah, I might, yeah, I guess there's a couple different ways. I'm gonna do a couple of things before I do a flipbook. One thing I'm gonna do is increase just the resolution of this base shape. Before I make these changes, I might save, just in case something goes horribly wrong. Hopefully it's not too cursed of a day, besides the Voronoi fracture not working. So yeah, this is the 12th. You have a technique to do frayed edges. I would try to do that as like a post process, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? You could do it with a texture. You could do it with, you would need to do a bit of stuff in Vex. Let me finish reconfiguring this, but I could touch on it in a little bit. So yeah, what I wanted to do was increase this frequency, just to add more resolution or try to get a little more detail into the cloth and the ripping patterns. The one issue that's going to have is because this group is based off of the topology, like the total number of points. If you have a higher resolution mesh, this is going to group more points. So there's 53 highlighted points now. If you want to keep the same amount of points, there's a few things you can do. You can group things using Vex. I'm just trying to think what the best method is. You could like group based off of a random value, but as you increase the resolution, you're still going to have more points in the group. So we'll just set it up like this. Do sort. So before I do that, just do the typical group, the regular group node. Points, just set this back to group 1. So if I just do explicitly 0 through 12, then it will be 13 because it's starting at 0 and going up to 12. So I'll go 0 through 11 and I'll always get that many points. But now these are always, because of just connectivity, they're always going to be in the same location. So with this one, you just do random. then these points should be spread out, just distributed randomly. But this way, it's a bit more convenient because you can know you're explicitly pinning or constraining a set number of points. And then if you care about the actual original point numbers, you could just store them. So this makes a copy of the point number into the index attribute. And then after you do your grouping, you just restore the original point order. Just do by attribute index. Then it should go back to where everything was. But we still have the grouped points. So if we bring up a spreadsheet, should be able to see what's happening. So like this copies the point number over to index attribute. Here, everything's getting shuffled around like a deck of cards, just randomly ordered. We group the first 12 points, and then this restores everything back to the original point number. So if someone gives you a model or something like that, it's generally better not to mess with their point number if you're going to export it back to Maya or a different software package. So that should fix that issue. Now we should kind of have like, we've basically decoupled our grouping from the topology resolution. So if you want to increase or decrease resolution, you'll always have the same amount of pin stuff getting ripped apart. So yeah, it looks like this is still pretty promising. Let's just apply these other nodes with a particle morph. The grouping, the index enumeration. Yeah, it's a nice trick. You could also do some stuff with like attribute transfer, group transfer, but it's good to know all the tools. So just do a flipbook from this camera view. See what happens. Should take. Still seems to be solving pretty quickly, like a couple minutes. I'm gonna get some water. I'll be right back. Water time. Need to start using this timer to keep track of my water hydration schedule. Never see me drink coffee. Yeah, I usually do in the morning after noon. I tend to stop because like the caffeine makes it difficult for me to sleep if I drink it too late in the day. I might do some morning streams at some point. I was thinking about doing some more math-centric stuff, like vector maths, and structured more like a course. If I did that, I might do it in the morning so that the EU people, it's not the middle of the night. It's not 1 a.m. when it's starting for them or whatever. Yeah, I don't know like what I would do with it yet. There's a couple ideas I've had. It would just be going through vector math, but it would be either like building a particle solver from scratch, or doing the other thing I was thinking about was like the knitting or the yarn based stuff. It's like pretty easy to get pretty nerdy with either of those. I think they're both get the lab coat for sure. But yeah, I would think about doing it at like 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. my time or something like that. Because I think that is like ideal for the rest of the particle solvers from scratch are very handy. Yeah, I think the particle solver is an interesting one. If you look up like vector math for games, there's like a subset of kind of vector or algebra. Some of it's, I guess, just like geometry, if it's like the Pythagorean theory or whatever. But either of those, like knitting or particle solvers, is pretty useful. So people use this in 3D just to find the distance between two points or coordinates or whatever, but actually applying it to stuff in 3D and like seeing things move around or update, it just, I think, is a lot easier to explain it that way or have people wrap their minds around it. But one day hoping to try to get started with it before the end of this year, but we'll see what happens. Built a cloth solver in JavaScript, turning it into Vex. Yeah, some people built some Vex, I think maybe even some OpenCL cloth solvers before Vellum. It's kind of, you just extend a particle solver or particle setup a little bit, like adding springs to it essentially, and you get a cloth solver. Somewhat like a very rudimentary implementation of it. This thing started getting pretty, I shouldn't have increased the resolution so high. It's looking cool with some of the wrinkles and stuff like that. Maybe I should have just decreased the break threshold. It's like a animal hide. It's getting like blade apart or something. As the arms, it's like you're gonna cook a rack of ribs or something like that. But yeah, I was thinking like either particle is cool because you could do like vortexes with like cross products and stuff. But the other thing, the knitting or that thread stuff, is interesting as well because you do like some spiraling or braiding. It's all like helixes. It's like sine and cosine, or you can do it with cross products and stuff as well. But so either one is kind of the same knowledge and same stuff is getting explained. I don't know, maybe particle is good because it's like more visually interesting. Things are moving around. It looks like this is starting to break. We're getting there. Knitting. The knitting is cool, but it would be, I mean, either way, you're kind of like, you're gonna be doing more stuff from scratch than you would be like if you're doing it for a production scenario, because it's like you're more interested in explaining the math. All right, it looks like these started to speed up, I think, as the welds are starting to break. Maybe it's going faster. I don't know. But yeah, if I figure out my schedule and stuff like that for building out these times, like I'm imagining it would be like once a week, maybe like 5 to 10 modules or 5 to 10 weeks. I'll definitely put a poll in the Discord or on Twitter or something like that, so people can get a fair selection of if it would either be knitting or particle solver. We're getting a big rip right here. Consider Patreon. Yeah, I'm thinking there's other stuff I'm working on as well, but it would be eventually doing one of them. It would be just an extra place, so I imagine that there's a good selection of people that aren't that dialed into Twitch, so that they could still like subscribe and get things. But all the Twitch, I need to find a way to like link it up so that the Twitch subscribers could still get access to it. Like I don't believe that there's a way to do that with Patreon right now. Where you, like I looked into it a couple weeks ago and you can't manually import. Yeah, I don't know if it's... I'm not a big fan of the way Patreon is organized in terms of their UI and their... It's kind of just like a news feed or newsletter. But just in terms of their business model and stuff like that, it makes a lot more sense for me. The Twitch... With Twitch subscriptions, I think I can import people's emails so I can distribute stuff to them that way. So I might pause this. I don't know, it is starting to be pretty interesting. I think I'm just gonna jump out of it. It was just a bit too difficult to control the look and stuff like that. Like it was becoming too too slow to work on and get something interesting happening. Yeah, there's different ways to set things up. There's other things I'm looking into, like the way that this guy set up his workshops is pretty cool as well. He just has like a mailing list inviting people to it, and then when he gets enough people for his session or whatever, like he's able to work with a small group of people through a workshop or whatever. This is like Unity stuff or whatever, but it's kind of similar to like fluid solvers and some aspects of that. But yeah, I'm still looking into all the other stuff and all that. Yeah, Twitch is a good place. Like I don't think it would ever really go away. Get sponsored, become a full-time streamer. Get my gaming chair out. My sponsored by Coke Gaming. So yeah, I think like up here, I'm just gonna go back maybe 42, something like that. It's nice the way that this is set up. I'm just sure that there will always be a set number of points in that group. Then I'm just gonna reduce that threshold of splitting. So I think this is just gonna be a bit more directable or friendly for being able to control it. Gaming chair, lab coat. You guys ever file these support tickets with side effects? They fix stuff. So sometimes it takes them a year. They'll fix it eventually. Filed many tickets. So yeah, I don't know. One of these is getting really stretched out. Might be this point jitter right here is like they're going in any direction. I might switch this around instead and just do transform. And then if I do for scale, just add time to it. Then it goes up. Still not scaling from the origin, or it is scaling from the origin, not like the centroid of the points. I think I can just add that centroid expressions in. So this way, like, my concern over here was that could just add the groups to visualize it a bit better. Like certain pinned points were getting pulled inwards or in bad directions. So just uniformly pulling the pinned points out might give me better results or more interesting results. Yeah, the tickets filing is nice, but sometimes you're just too caught up in work and other stuff. You don't have enough time to like track it down and document it for them and explain everything. Whoa. So you can do a subdivide on this Vellum post process as well, and then when you do this blur afterwards, it will just add a bit more detail, or enhance things a little bit. But yeah, this is pretty cool. I don't know if like playing around with this threshold a bit more would start to get more interesting feeling. Who was it? Dubtronics was asking about the frayed edges. Might be a bit of vex and stuff like that to get involved in. So do another Boolean. You do seam. Oh no. Oh no. So this is getting BB seams. Where are all those lines? I only want the intersections of the grids with the A shape. So this is going to be where things are getting cut at, or the seam lines. There's some things you could do with it. Maybe just before I do that, I might want to orient, maybe not a long curve, just the typical polyframe. So if you assign this instead of normals, you get tangents. These will all lie like along the surface. You could try some different methods. I don't know, if you wanted to try to get rid of those triangle shapes or whatever. I think this is okay though. So yeah, this is gonna cut, and then we can do a transfer. Just switch this around. So now this is like the surface direction, or something that's lying on the surface. Then if you did a copy to points with lines, just gonna template this. You want to set this to be going along the Z direction. And then the length can be somewhat short. And then if we look at these, you could see it's starting on top of the origin, or like on one side of the Z, or I guess the X axis. So you just pull this back by something like 0.5. I think you need to multiply that by the length to keep it centered. So negative 0.5 is starting at the center, and then as you scale it, you need to compensate or whatever like that. So now you have a bunch of lines like this, and I think you do the ray node. Just to this input geometry. You do minimum distance. This will like snap the points to the nearest position on the surface. But you can also store the hit prim and hit prim UV that are useful. But you can use them with the attribute interpolate. So after the simulation, it will reapply them, or it will like transfer the motion over to it essentially. It looks like this. I've done some stuff wrong. So these attributes here that it's adding are named differently with this. So I can just rename them. Hit prim UV. So now as the surface deforms or moves, this is going to keep applying these like edge, fringe, or threads or whatever to it. Because these are only made up of like 2 points, it's going to keep having kind of issues, like it will just keep stretching. You might want to increase the number of points that are happening here. You'd see if eventually this will, in the areas where it starts to really get pulled apart, how it handles that. You might want to kind of like pre-fracture these lines. Like if you do the, I think it's just the convert lines up, it will destroy the connectivity of them. Just let it solve for a second. Should be 5 or 10 more seconds. All right, here it is. So yeah, these are still getting stretched too far. When you do this array, these operations, might just want to leave these at their default settings, and then after this array is performed, you could do resample to upres them. And then I think if you do convert line, this basically treats each portion of the primitive as like its own island. Like it's you do this with the facet and they become disconnected. We just do unique points. Looks like they're still stretching too far. I was trying to get away without getting into too much of X with this. But I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. All right. Just gonna cheat a little bit. If you just do measure right here, you can get the perimeter of these lines, or this is the length. So it's instead of a polygon, it's just a line. So the edge perimeter is just the length of the curves. And then if you look at like the curves after they're getting interpolated or moved around, you could measure it again. And then if you compare the length or the difference of these two distances, you should be able to see like which threads or which areas are getting pulled. So I've measured and then put it into this extra input. So if you just look at running over primitives, assigning the color, looking at the perimeter. So this is going to be the perimeter attribute that was measured before getting deformed and stretched. And then you subtract it. I think you can do whoops. I think you can do it like this. It's like a shortcut. You can see some areas are getting brighter than others. You might want to do absolute value. So as the difference between these two lengths or distances increases, these will get brighter. You could just do like a blast by distance. So I've stored it into the primitive color. If it's above a certain threshold, remove it, and then just clear the color off of things to get it back to the somewhat default state. Whoops, did the wrong one. So this is kind of getting you somewhat close. You probably want to do some stuff with like noise or something like that to make the edges look a little bit more fancy. But this is how I would start with the frayed edges. Sorry, this isn't the most concise workflow, Mr. Dubtronics. But this is my idea as like a starting approach. And I don't know, depending on attributes and stuff, I would work through this to reveal more of the edges. I'm gonna put this on hold for right now, and I'm gonna continue along for another peeling, looking at just working with more attributes and things like that. But yeah, sorry I got a little bit too I got lost in the sauce. But this, I think it would be a good starting point. There's just more trial and error and experimentation or stuff that I need to put into it. I'll just leave this over here on the side if you want to look into it. All right. I'm gonna do one more flipbook. Gonna get some more water. We'll be back in a second. We'll let this flipbook go for a little bit longer. I'm gonna move over to a new setup or a new idea. Node network is starting to, yeah, it's the same stuff happening in both, same thing twice. So I'm gonna let this go for a little bit, and then we'll try doing something closer to that, like Ghost in the Shell reference, like getting lifted up and stuff, getting pulling off. The crazy stretching. I'm not sure. So I would imagine just like specific points are getting harder to break the weld bonds. Could investigate it a little bit. before moving on. Could be basically this stretch stress isn't the best. You could do like stretch distance. That might be a simple way to eliminate the super long ones from getting like pulled that far apart. So maybe changing the, is that a Prisms t-shirt? Yeah, it's one of the older side effects t-shirts that they used to, I don't know if they have it anymore. But yeah, it looks like this is, I don't know, giving like a little bit more expected tearing pattern or procedure. Just basically how this threshold or condition is being tested or updated over time. So if you wanted to restore some of this long lines, you could add maybe an attribute and then paint areas that you want to really get pulled apart or getting node tied like that. But yeah, it's probably better to fix that. It looks a bit like a too much like an artifact before. I think this updated method or whatever is a bit better. Yeah, so just leave this where it is. Just gonna grab everything and start somewhat new. I'm gonna go down a little bit with frequency, maybe like 26. And then this method here, I'm gonna try to set it up to get more little islands or cells. I think the size was just pretty big before, so we were like wasting some detail on things. All right. See what happens. Just gonna grab trying to start with a clean setup, and then I just keep copying and pasting the same junk over and over again. And we could do some more grids. And then maybe just try some different seeds with different rotational values. All right. This one could be pretty cool. So this one, I'm going to set it up to be more of that like Ghost in the Shell style, gradual reveal or peel or whatever you want to, however you want to think of it. Player 2, good to see you. Yeah, so we were playing around with other peeling ideas earlier. I'm kind of starting a new thing right now, so you came in at somewhat of a good spot. So I've been doing this Boolean to fracture the cloth or cut it up. We'll do Vellum configure to set up the basic cloth material. This is more of like a Ghost in the Shell style peel, like the old anime or the old cartoon, the skin or the wax peeling off. The shell, I guess. You're uneducated on it. There's different images and stuff like that. Like this is from the live action one. But basically this woman or the robot or whatever is like starting in submersed in this like synthetic wax. It's a bit of like the West world or whatever. It's kind of like building humans or whatever. So eventually they reveal like the formed preformed skin or whatever. So it's just that, I mean, you could do the same thing with like ash or paper getting burned and turning into ash. It's kind of the same physics, I guess, behind it, or the same motion. Yeah, so we have cloth configured, and we'll just do welds. So I'm guessing this, we might have done too many. It seems to be kind of slow right here. So it might be too many little pieces that this is getting. We'll see. It's possible this is just like a one-time cook. Like if you create these constraints, once it finishes, maybe it will start to be more responsive. I don't know. It usually gives you like the timer or the counter. Yeah, I don't know. Doesn't, it's not happy with me. I think I'm gonna have to start a new session. Alright, sorry about that. I think it was just too much edges or too much geometry for the weld to try to create, or something something it didn't like. All right, we're back. So I guess just dial this back, maybe go down to 12. I might also just start with a lower frequency. Yeah, that seems like that was a lot faster to cook. I don't know if it just got hung up on something. It's the mesh man. Too much for his brain to think about. It destroyed him. Python? I haven't been using too much Python recently. It's a bit handy to know for like working in pipelines and stuff like that. What's happening with some of this? Could be my grids are just a bit too small. But when I shrunk them down, maybe they stopped going through the shape completely. It could have been causing some issues. I think that was probably what threw the weld off, was there was like slices but they weren't islands. Like it was just you like did a slit with a knife or something like that. What are you trying to do with Python, Mr. Sonikono? I'm gonna do Vellum solver. Some Linux. Yeah, the stuff I was doing there was just the shell. You just look up bash scripts or bash syntax or whatever. There's some stuff for it. So we'll try the wind again. Yeah, it looks similar. You can do, you can get into Python from the shell. You could test out your stuff or whatever with it. You can read the little Python poems that they've written for you. Sometimes I use that as a calculator or whatever. Nice. Like you can do simple calculations or whatever with it. So but it can be somewhat handy, but I don't use it enough to know it super well. So I think I want to turn off gravity again. And then with my, it's possible maybe even without these welds, was getting closer to like the ghost in the shell type of stuff. I think one of the best ways to do this would just be to mask things out with an attribute. I think doing it with the actual could set it up with the nodes, but in a similar way that I was doing it with the sand grain character tutorial. If I just do a different type of constraint up here, I think just pin to target permanent. This constraint method, whoa. This constraint method will actually just create point attributes, I believe. Is it doing it? Might be just you have pinpoints up here. So we'll set the mass to 0. Okay. So yeah, if I just set it here with stopped, basically that's making this stopped attribute that's set to true or 1. And that's one of the attributes I was using in that sand grain character. If you do match animation, then it adds this glue to animation, and if you have things deforming or moving around, it will go along with it. I think for right now I can just use this stopped, and basically that's telling the solver not to move things around or not to change the points with the forces or anything like that. And then if we just want to gradually free stuff over time, I think this distance along geometry can be a good one to use. So if you just do start points, if you type in 0, just to grab wherever the 0th or the start point on the geometry is, you can take a look at this distance. It looks like this is obeying connectivity. But if I just do it before, then you see we have something starting at 0, and then as the distance increases across the mesh, this attribute gets a higher distance value. I might do the trick I was doing earlier. We'll store the rest position. Apply the noise. Just add it to the point position, centered, and then swap back the captured or stored rest position. So you can do this to get more interesting, like the noise is embedded into that distance now, because the distance was computed in a distorted space. This isn't a smooth gradient anymore. It has it's like a bit of distortion to it. So what I'm going to be doing with it, just do a wrangle. We can take a look at the color, set it equal to the distance. So before I was just control middle mouse click, and then you can click on any of these attributes to visualize their values. This one I'm actually just transferring the distance over into color, but we can compare it against time. So if we just do that less than symbol, you can see as this scene or animation time increases, then this condition becomes true. So basically as time progresses, this value gets bigger, and as it gets greater than the distance that this node calculated, it evaluates to true, or yes, I don't know, true or false. So this is going to get used for the pin. So basically the stopped state, could just flip this around. So instead of starting at 0, we'll start at 1. So this will be stopped or white or true. And then as time progresses, it will be false, or the stopped state will be turned off. And then I think we just want to do this in the simulation. These stopped attribute doesn't get automatically updated each time. So if I just do attribute transfer, then I can grab this dist attribute. So we have the dist coming from over here, and whoops, oh no. All right, so even here we can see it's gotten transferred over. I did everything in this other chain because the distance wasn't traveling across fractured or edges connectivity. And then you can even take this code snippet and just, I did Control-C to put it onto my clipboard. And then if I go inside of here, I think I can just do pop wrangle. And instead of applying this to the color, we want to apply it to that stopped attribute. We might be able to do it. I think this constraint property is just for constraint primitives. You might be able to do it with another node. I think this one is fine. So this, I'm just doing it inside of here so that it updates during the simulation. I'm still gonna want this wind being applied so that as they become unstopped or released, then they should start to move around or heal. Something happened here. Maybe those points didn't get completely cut. Looks like they figured it out. Love the Houdini theme. This is the I need to make a bot command for it or something. Yes, I have a odd force search. If you just search odd force slate, this is where I got this theme from. So you can just follow his the instructions in this thread or whatever. It's from a pretty old post, but it should still work. Like, I haven't done any updates or anything to it. So this seems to be working pretty well. Might be able to go back, like, if I'm not welding, I think that will let me do Voronoi fracture. So the reason I started using this Boolean is because the welds were having trouble connecting different pieces. Houdini, what is this? I don't think I've ever seen someone stream that on Twitch. Yeah, Houdini is a pretty rare 3D application. It's getting used more and more recently, more and more robustly. It's a general 3D package, but it's just more technical. It's used for a lot of visual effects stuff, and more recently it's being used by everyone. Yeah, it's a bit it's a bit of a mystery. Yeah, I was doing 3ds Max a long time ago. Once you understand the nodes and stuff, it becomes easier, but I think now there's a lot more learning resources and stuff available. So it's a bit easier to figure out. But I would definitely recommend it if you're interested in doing effects or procedural geometry generation or animation, like using algorithms or using other things besides other hand created content. I think ZBrush and Maya is still really good for that. Like, if you're rigging characters, some of that stuff can be a little bit easier. Is there a basic guide for shading and applying textures? I think Rohan, I don't know if he's updated it, but Rohan Dalvi, he used to have a really good one. Is there a basic working Apple compared to working for VFX? Apple was more, so I think this one might be. Oh, he's updating it. I think it became out of date when they updated Houdini. He might be updating it soon. I'm not sure. Work for Apple. Yeah, they definitely have super specific things that they are looking for. The designers there are super like specific about what they want, so it's generally like can get pretty difficult to achieve the results that they're looking for. But it's pretty rewarding, I would say. Like they pay pretty well, and then the work that they produce, like it's very hard to actually get something that they'll put out, because they end up killing or just giving up on a lot of ideas that aren't turning out that well. But if you do, I don't know, it's a good experience. It's definitely different than film, because it's like, I don't know, the pacing of it is more slow. It's like spend a year just working on the same thing, the same like 30-second animation, whereas film can be a lot more just like find a shot, add the dust, get it out, send it to the client. Like it's a lot more kind of cut and dry or whatever. So I'm just going to go back and rebuild this Voronoi fracturing stuff. Apple Maps. Yeah, they have a pretty big maps team in Sunnyvale. I knew some Houdini people that worked in that area. Yeah, they have a lot of different departments that they use Houdini in, or that they use 3D for. I was in the Marcom, or the marketing department. So it was more like doing animation for their advertising. They axed the night crew. Oh no, that was for maps. Just anything. Yeah, I don't know in terms of internships right now. It's a bit up in the air with the pandemic situation and everything like that. I would just try emailing and contacting as many people as you can via email, and just tell them you're ready to work remote. It seems like a lot of people are still getting work done, but it's just nobody's really going to offices for some time. I'm not sure how much compositing they do at Apple. Like a good amount of it is just stills, and the people will do it themselves in Photoshop, like the designers and stuff. I think sometimes they're looking for it. All right, I think I've done too many points. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a good time right now just to grind and learn, build your portfolio, build your resume and all that. I mean, it depends where you are in your career and all that stuff. But if you are looking to get into the industry, just everyone's in the same kind of shitty situation and just making the best of it. Can't really go outside and do stuff. You might as well be productive and learn or do something, I guess. I'm gonna add more points. So I think this Voronoi can give you like a more interesting pattern in terms of the fracture. And that's why I've switched over to it. It's more closer to that like ghost in the shell look. I don't know if I still had the tab open. Just this paint peeling I was talking about is like the more of a Voronoi cellular pattern. You can use the Voronoi fracture. I prefer to use these nodes. It's a bit stripped down, like it's the same stuff that they're using inside of the this asset. I think it's a bit faster because there's less stuff going on. With these, anything that's a digital asset in Houdini, there's a bit of a bug. I haven't heard anything about Weta or any dig issues. So these digital assets, like one reason I'll stay away from them is that they never report the cook time properly. There's no way for them to collect all the cooks. But if you middle mouse here, I could see that this is taking exactly 10 seconds. I think inside of here, there's just a lot of extra stuff that's going on. You can see they're still doing this Voronoi split. And inside of here, they're still doing the tetrahedralize. But sometimes if you it's just a couple more nodes to lay down. So it can be a bit quicker for big fractures. If you're cutting up a lot of pieces, it can be quicker to do it this way. I'm not sure what you mean by digital issues. It was like the Sony hack. You guys remember when Sony got hacked for like a month? It was a big news story. Toxic waste dump. Just need to open this investigation. So this, just looking at the wrong side. But the distance, stuff like that is still all working. That was a different situation, I think, but I don't know if that was necessarily a hack. I think it was closer to the release of cars, and one of the third-party vendors that they hired to do like trailers or something, or editing for it, tried to do some kind of ransom. It was like closer down the distribution chain or something. But yeah, that was a similar situation. All right, so we're getting a little bit more detail in the peeling. I think I can keep doing this noise stuff with the Voronoi split. So instead of doing the distance in the noised up, distorted space, I'm gonna try to do the Voronoi splitting just to add some edge detail so that they aren't all uniform cuts. This could be a bit too low frequency. It could be cool though, like if you're doing a I don't know, more of an abstract material or fluid or something like that. It's a pretty interesting pattern. So I'm just gonna see what it looks like. We probably want to go in and, like, I was more after some of these more subtle jagged edges. But yeah, this just breaks up the Voronoi fracture gives you nice distributions of cells, but the edges of them are always perfectly like straight or whatever. This could be cool if it's like that sneaker that we looked at a while back. It had some patterns or some breakup or whatever, but it was still seemed like it was a pretty repetitive cellular pattern. So we want to get closer to paint. I think with this, when we distort it, just decrease the element size so that it's a lot more like tattered. You the sneakers again? Yeah, I don't have the cache anymore, but I was adding some detail to these edges and they got pushed right. It was like a more graphic design kind of pattern, kind of like that. So that kind of like this. It's like I've distorted it too far again, but it's seems closer to that pattern, the black and orange. It's like I forget the name of that, but it was the one someone linked, the Man versus Machine. It had like a peeling effect. It had this, I don't know, it was like closer to what I'm doing, but I think I'm just, yeah, I think it was the Air Max 2017. So I'm just trying to go in and maybe this, trying to go in and get a little bit more detail in the edges. Yeah, I think this is working a little bit better now. Just let this simulate for a little bit. It was the red. It was like a more of an animal organic pattern, like red and black. The might not have been man versus machine. Pretty sure it was. The animal pack. We're in the wrong year. I think the algorithm is just too flooded with their work. I don't know. It might not have been. It might not have been Air Max. It might have been it might have been like a Jordan. Didn't this one. Hyper Venom. But yeah, I was just thinking this at some point I had a more graphic pattern that the broken up edges kind of reminded me of this. Like they still have a pretty repetitive structure. This looks like it's closer to just straight Voronoi. But yeah, like I was saying, you could get different shoes or different patterns or whatever. This kind of stuff. Quite a lot of people who worked or work at Weta, these things come up are old. Definitely have worked some stories. They're old. Yeah, I don't know. It seems like all the different companies have had the pretty big claims. There's the one like Technicolor or some claims of bad management or harassment or something. So yeah, starting to get some breakup to the edges, just making it look a little bit more interesting. I think with this wind, just make it more subtle. It feels a little too violent right now, like it's just ripping too much. The ghost stuff or the stuff in that thing looked pretty cool because you see just a lot more of like the slow mo. I guess it's just kind of slow motion. You just have more time to see like the cracking and peeling apart and stuff like that. I might have gone too much, too low. I think because the topology and stuff isn't changing. If you want to, you can always do a retime after the simulation or whatever. See how that looks. Needs to peel and shrink a little bit. Yeah, that could be cool with the edges. That I think if we just add in the cloth stretch rest length scale. I think just updating this to be less than 1, you'll get a bit of shrinking because we're already freezing stuff with the pin. So the solver won't operate or it won't update stuff until it's been released. You get a bit of shrinkage. This might be too much. The stuff is kind of disappearing. Maybe just 90%. More constraints. So I don't know, I would just think about it like topology. Like if you have more edges, you have more constraints, essentially. If you did, this is a somewhat low res shape. You do increase the resolution of it, or the frequency, start to get some more detail. You can also do some stuff like post simulation, maybe some displacement shaders or stuff like that. Substeps. It might basically like decreasing this noise right here is kind of like increasing substeps. Like you're either solving in like slower motion. You could increase substeps as well. You might be able to speed it up, like turning off collisions if you think you don't need them. You're just doing, you just want as much detail as possible. Or if you're just like testing stuff. Yeah, you could do more. I don't know how many substeps. You're definitely getting a lot more peeling action with that. Maybe 3. Starting to be pretty cool. This follow-up is still looking too radial. Like it looks like you're just doing a sphere. So I think, just look at this visualizer here again. If we increase some of this noise stuff, maybe just the amplitude, starting to spread less uniform. So maybe that will help make it look a little bit cooler. And then I think right here, just going up more edges should make things look cooler as well. So just doing the fracture should be a little slower because just cutting more edges or a higher resolution mesh slows it down. But I think the end result, like you should have more detailed edges, just more interesting pieces when it pulls apart. I think some of the uniformity of the peeling shapes we were getting was because everything was too low resolution. All right, you start to get some more smaller pieces, and I think the edges get a little bit more detailed when increase the resolution, like this fracture pattern as well, the transition, just more resolution on the mesh, and you have some more detail. I don't know if these normals are, seems like after the simulation the normals aren't getting updated enough or something. I think they're okay. It might just be I don't have like a ton of lights in my scene or something. But yeah, we'll try another. Whoa. Oh no. Alright. I think I need to move this file back. Working out of the crash directory. Okay, we're back in business. So let's see what a flipbook of this higher resolution mesh looks like. Starting to get some more detail, things going on. So it's possible you might want to turn on collisions again at the end, but just to dial in forces and like visualize the first pass of the simulation, it's quicker without it. But I think in the end you might get some more interesting like collisions and wrinkling and bending and stuff if these can bump up against each other. But just for getting stuff going quickly, that's why I've turned it off for right now. I'm gonna try going a bit lower with no, I don't think it's considering self collisions, so I turned off everything. But because it's the only object, like you could turn off self collisions. Like I think both of these are doing the same thing right now. I might do more shrinking of the constraints. I'm gonna go in here and dial, maybe reduce the swirl size. Increase the post length as well. Just trying to get more detailed noise pulling this stuff apart. I don't know, this might be too much shrinking. I think I don't know, it's almost like the stuff is disappearing. I'm gonna go up, just do less pieces. We'll just try something like this, maybe. I think if the pieces get bigger, you would see more of the stretching and peeling and stuff. Yeah, I don't know, for whatever reason it just seems this shading on it is like pretty flat. Flatter than the headlight and all that stuff usually is. It's starting to look cooler, I think, with less pieces, less islands. Start to see more of the interesting bits. Just doing some tweaks. Just try it with less. Just the default sub steps that increased the strength of the force, and then also the swirl size was like a lower frequency pattern. All right, I'm gonna do a couple tweaks and then probably wrap it up. So this element size, I'm gonna make it bigger. We just have, the pattern seemed a bit too repetitive before, like it was too high frequency. Let me just get back to the visualizer. All right. So turn on collisions. Houdini. I still need to add the Houdini emote. Pulling tricks out like Houdini. So yeah, I'll run this flip book. We're getting close to wrapping things up though. Here he is. Pulling tricks out like Houdini. But he's like, many thanks to my sweethearts. Use it for years. Yeah, it's it can be useful for parts of your what a Chadwick Houdini. It can be useful to just augment parts of your workflow depending on like what type of role, what type of artist you are. Like even if you're a ZBrush modeler or sculptor, you could do like some cloth simulations or stuff with it. You could just use it for a portion of your workflow, and it's just difficult. Like sometimes you need to jump in and just cut off other areas of your workflow and try to bring them into Houdini. Yeah, it's pretty good for using Redshift. I haven't used Redshift in other 3D packages, but the way Houdini has the Redshift plugin for it is pretty streamlined. Like doing instancing and attributes and all that stuff is pretty cool. Yeah, for LiDAR scans, I've seen other people use it just for LiDAR because it can handle so many points, like millions. If you try to do the same amount of points in Maya or other software packages, it can triple them. So even with these collisions turned on, it's still going pretty quickly. But it's okay, I didn't notice any issues with the English. Houdini does eat up your RAM for all meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I have 128 gigabytes in this computer, but seems like doing just anything with... yeah, it seems... sometimes I'll fill up my 128 gigs as well. Just doing like big particle simulations. 64 gigabytes should be good. I mean, I'm just thinking like sometimes I go wild and I'm doing 50 million particles or something like that, and it's I mean it's easy with Houdini because it's just sliders and like nothing. There's no warnings it will give you. Like you're gonna create a ton of geometry, so before you know it, like it's easy to accidentally kind of crash it or whatever. Yeah, mantras. I mean, it doesn't suck. It's good for what it does. It's just too slow for doing like independent work or commercials or advertising. But I use it still for some things. Like you have a ton of control with it. You can use it for baking textures, like the game stuff. Houdini Boolean uses only one core. Yeah, I think certain geometry operations, just theoretically, it's impossible to multi-thread them. Like if you imagine a mesh and trying to cut it and then multi-thread it, you could run into issues where it's like chopping up. It's like you can't really multi-thread that operation. Yeah, you can cache it out. You can, like, sometimes what I do is you cut it up into 8 pieces or however many threads you have, and then you can run all of those Boolean like wedges or whatever in parallel. There's some ways around it or whatever that can be useful. But generally, like cutting or destroying or adding points to a mesh, you'll never really be able to multi-thread those parts of your operations. All right, so this flipbook is nearly done. Let's take a look. Yeah, the shaders, Redshift has some good ones built in, but there's less like shader packs or stuff like that that's like readily available. This could be a good one interesting to try, like the frayed edges and stuff like that. Adding it to it, it would be nice to have those details. I think this opening bits with this stretching and stuff is working pretty well. Kurgan model. Yeah, I'm not sure if it was with Mantra. The Mantra skin shading has always been pretty difficult to... The displacement could have been like coordinate space or tangent space. Like sometimes you have to negate those. I've had that issue before. You've pretty much killed it. This guy is destroyed. Yeah, I don't know. There might be some things I would do to take it further, like adding in some small bits or things like that. Like you can combine multiple scatters here. You do another scatter with a generate, maybe a replicate. Do this to do little clusters, little pockets. And then if you merge your 2 points together, then when you do the fracture, you'll get like little focused or concentrations of little cracks or little peeled areas. So instead of having uniform big pieces, or earlier I had uniformly little pieces, this is a good way to break it up into smaller and just add some variation or whatever. So where that point replicate was happening, you just get like little pockets of detail. I don't know, with this stretch stuff, it seems Seems to be a bit weird, the behavior or whatever it was giving me. Let me see what happens. I think every time I update the fracture, sometimes this point number 0 moves around or whatever, because like the topology is getting new numbers. I'm gonna go in and just increase. If you just multiply the time, then that peeling stuff will happen more quickly, like the transition. So it should happen 8 times as fast, going from like activating the peeled bits or whatever. Yeah, now we have some interesting variation in sizes of the peeled areas, just making it look less uniform, not only in the edge cutting up or moving the edges around, and then also just making areas dense and sparser of edges. Yeah, this could be nice because you start to see more of the revealed area and some of the peeled, like cracks or whatever. More interesting variation and stuff like that in some areas. We'll do one more flip book. It's probably going to be it for the peels, for the vellum for a little bit. But yeah, if you really want to speed this up, you could turn the collisions off. I don't know how much you need it. Like, I think it will add some subtle bending or variations, but if you're really in a pinch for quick turnarounds or whatever, for director, supervisor, or whatever, I think you could turn off the self collisions if you're just doing like a super high resolution, but like if you have a lot of geometry that's peeling or whatever. Last chance, going once. One more, 2 months later. One last one. So my schedule tomorrow will be going into a bit of the pyro, but yeah, this is for Vellum. Gonna take a bit of a break. So yeah, over the last month I did like different ideas, different techniques or whatever with Vellum. Forget what I started. I think I started with like draping the vehicle, this like Lamborghini with a cloth, and then did some different stuff with constraints. Vellum Sandman, that's originally what did get me down this path. I'm still working on going through the attributes and stuff like that on my websites. There's like a ton of constraint attributes. I haven't gone through all of them yet. But yeah, I need to make these, like some of these I still have them blank or whatever. Let's see what this flipbook looks like. I'm pretty much using only Houdini. Sometimes I'll use other stuff. Just simple applications like Nuke. Sometimes for compositing or color corrections or stuff like that. I try to use Houdini as much as possible, just because it kind of reduces like the dependencies. If you have your workflow all in one, you can automate more stuff, and you just have to. It's easier to like reuse things and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a little bit more interesting with some of the variation, increasing the speed of the healing. Pretty cool. Whoa. All right. It's probably going to be it. It will be it for today. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. Hopefully less smoke. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their weekend. Take it easy.